The most dangerous tax in history was not placed on luxury. It was placed on something the body needed to survive. Salt preserved food, fed armies, kept animals alive, and entered every kitchen. That made it different from gold, silk, or spice. A person could refuse a luxury, but a household could not easily refuse salt. In Han China, officials argued whether the state should control salt itself. Centuries later in France, a border could change the price of survival. In India, the sea made salt freely, but empire claimed the right to sell it back. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi began walking toward a forbidden handful. To understand why states feared losing salt, we have to return to the moment before law, when salt was only residue. Salt began as residue. Water disappeared, and the body's demand remained. People carried brine before they carried policy. The work was heavy, wet, and repetitive. Brine had to be boiled. Every grain required fire, vessels, labor, and time. Once scraped and dried, salt changed food. Fish, meat, and vegetables lasted longer. It entered meals, animal feed, and preserved stores. Scarcity did not wait for politics. Salt did not appear everywhere. People gathered where brine, seawater, or mineral deposits allowed it. A household could need salt daily, but production gathered at a few stubborn places. As demand grew, boiling sites became louder. Furnaces multiplied. Steam thickened the air. Salt also consumed forests. The mineral looked white, but its production blackened the ground. Draw, boil, scrape, pack. The rhythm made salt visible as organized output. A brine source fixed people to the landscape. Work returned to the same opening again and again. In the upper Yangtze region, salt production was already established before Qin expansion into Sichuan. Production required vessels, fuel, storage, and hands that could be counted. Order appeared before law arrived. Once packed, salt became countable. Jars, sacks, weights, and seals turned need into inventory. The moment salt could be measured at the source, power could imagine claiming it there. Officials did not need to create demand for salt. They only had to stand near supply. Farmers needed it, soldiers carried it, cooks guarded it, herds searched for it in feed. A ruler could not inspect every meal, but he could control a well, pan, or depot. Depots changed meaning. They were no longer shelters for goods, but checkpoints for necessity. Salt still moved outward, but now movement passed through permission. The route had changed. Inspectors, licensed handlers, and clerks entered the path between furnace and table. The charge could be taken upstream. By the time salt reached food, revenue was already extracted. The body created demand. The source created a choke point. The state saw both. Under Emperor Wu, the Western Han state grew heavier through war, expansion, and intervention. Salt and iron became state monopolies, part of a wider attempt to finance imperial power. The monopoly needed offices, workers, transport, and accounts. Control became daily administration. People felt policy through access and price, not through the language of court strategy. In 81 BCE at the Han court, officials and scholars argued over this system. Critics said monopolies burdened the people and pulled government too deeply into ordinary life. Defenders answered that the frontier, army, and treasury demanded reliable income. Salt could provide it. The stronger the system became, the more visible its burden grew. Revenue had a face. The state had found a tax people could not escape. Now it had to make them live inside it. The depot doors opened, but not freely. Salt now left under permission. Clerks divided salt into two worlds. Sealed loads and suspect loads. Carriers learned that the road now had a second surface. Documents loads departed by number, weight, and mark. Movement began as accounting. Rivers carried weight better than backs. Salt began to follow repeatable water corridors. Where water ended, carts and pack animals extended the monopoly inland. Gates, ferries, bridges, and passes became places where salt could be stopped. The route now mattered as much as the source. Every transfer became a test. At warehouses, salt stopped being cargo. Clerks made it inventory. Stacks formed by district and weight. Space itself became a ledger. Storage slowed the mineral down. Salt waited until officials released it. A missing basket was no longer a rumor. It was a gap between pile and record. Salt did not rot like grain. The fear was leakage, theft, diversion, quiet sale. Night watches, seals, and locked gates turned warehouses into enforcement architecture. Around the warehouse gathered porters, guards, drivers, clerks, inspectors, and informers. By holding salt, officials controlled more than supply. They controlled when need could be met. The state could command salt, but it still needed hands to move it. A license changed a person's hands. Without it, the same basket became contraband. The merchant still sought profit, but route, quota, and price now narrowed the margin. Local dealers did not simply buy salt. They received it through recognized channels. The village buyer no longer met the producer. He met the chain. Every official link created a new temptation, a hidden load, a false weight, a quiet payment. Trust left the system. Officials inspected hands, carts, seals, weights, and stories. The state did not abolish the market. It made the market carry its seal. Official prices made the monopoly look orderly. The burden entered as a number. Transport, storage, guards, clerks, and margin all traveled inside the final measure. At home, people measured more carefully. The system had made need expensive. Farmers did not debate monopoly theory. They saw less salt in the bowl. Remote districts paid for distance before they tasted anything. The farther road deepened the price. People began comparing legal salt with cheaper hidden salt. Price made temptation rational. A choice appeared where none had existed: obey the law or satisfy the body. Price turned administration into feeling. The state had entered the mouth. Smuggling began where official price separated from ordinary need. The gap became a road. Hidden bundles moved under grain, inside false cart bottoms, and beneath ordinary cargo villages. New ravines, reed beds, dry channels, and night paths before inspectors did. Patrols followed the same map: riverbanks, passes, markets, ferries, storage yards. Punishment had to be public because the state was defending something everyone understood. Each arrest taught two lessons: where the state watched and where it did not. Evasion raised enforcement costs. Higher costs demanded more offices, more guards, more records. By now, the monopoly weighed more than the salt: routes, warehouses, licenses, prices, patrols. Centuries later in France, salt entered royal finance as a familiar temptation. The Gabelle did not fall evenly. It spread across France as a patchwork of rules. One province could face one burden, the next a different one for the same white mineral. Across a fiscal line, another household could season, preserve, and store at a lower cost. Royal granaries made the tax visible. The kingdom stored obligation behind doors. Maps, ledgers, and seals turned local difference into a rule people had to buy. The state had drawn lines around need. People began noticing where those lines could be crossed. Legal salt came through royal granaries and authorized sellers, not through open choice. The line outside was not waiting for comfort, it was waiting for a required material. At home, the salt box stopped being simple. It carried the monarchy into the room. Every preserved fish, every salted strip of meat, now carried an administrative cost. Poor families stretched legal salt with care. Waste became a kind of fear. Salt for the pot competed with salt for storage. The same box served two urgencies. In places that depended on stored food, the tax pressed hardest before winter. Salt no longer tasted neutral. In many homes, it tasted measured, watched, and owed. Cheap salt on one side became profit on the other. Inequality started moving at night. Faux-sauniers crossed forests, fields, rivers, and back roads, with salt outside the law. Women, children, laborers, and traders could become carriers when the burden was close enough. Salt disappeared into hems, hay carts, livestock packs, and sacks marked for harmless goods. The loads could be small, the trips could repeat, profit accumulated quietly. Boundary villages learned which ditch, hedge, ferry, and mill path avoided inspection. Legal salt and hidden salt could sit near the same hearth, priced by different worlds. The Gabelle had built its opposite, a second salt network made of secrecy. Officers spread along roads, bridges, ferries, and provincial edges to defend the tax. A cart on a road was no longer just a cart. It was a possible crime. Searches reached sacks, coats, cellars, barns, stalls, and bedding. Privacy thinned around salt. Confiscated salt was displayed like evidence, though everyone knew what it was for. Arrests turned an accounting system into a scene of force. The tax had uniforms. Villages learned patrol hours, guard tempers, blind corners, and market day distractions. The monarchy spent people, time, and paperwork to protect revenue from a daily mineral. By then, the gabelle was not just collected, it was guarded against the people. By the 1780s, salt hatred belonged to a larger crisis of royal finance. In 1789, grievance lists carried local anger toward old burdens, including the salt tax. Where the burden was heavier, anger had a sharper local memory. The crown needed revenue. The public saw unequal extraction reaching into the pantry. The gabelle made a complicated regime simple to understand. Power priced necessity. Revolutionary politics moved against old privileges, indirect taxes, and the fiscal machinery of inequality. On March 20, 1790, the National Assembly abolished the salt tax. Salt did not cause the revolution alone. It made inequality tangible enough to hold. France left a warning. When necessity is visibly captured, resistance needs very little translation. The warning crossed time. In British India, salt again became a revenue instrument. Officials trusted salt because demand did not belong to one caste, province, or income. Production, sale, and movement were drawn into permits, duties, monopoly rules, and official depots. Coastal villages saw salt form nearby. Inland households paid through distance, duty, and scarcity. In a poor home, the salt tax was not abstract. It was the smaller pinch. In the ledger, bodily need lost its smell, heat, hunger, and became revenue. The empire taxed salt because everyone needed it. That was also why everyone understood. In Bengal, customs houses began blocking untaxed salt before it moved inland. The checkpoints stretched into a line, and the line grew into a barrier. Staff watched roads, ferries, river crossings, and passes where hidden salt could slip through. Then came the strangest border, a hedge built to stop salt. Thorn, dust, patrol roads, posts, and trenches turned taxation into landscape. Smugglers searched for gaps, weak guards, broken thorns, dry drains, and moonless crossings. The hedge had to be watched, watered, cut, repaired, staffed, and paid for. In 1879, the line was abandoned. The empire turned toward taxing salt closer to its source. After the old barrier, control tightened around manufacture, depots, licenses, and legal salt. Salt pans, depots, and licenses decided which crystals were lawful and which were crime. Workers scraped salt under limits, watched by paperwork, supervisors, heat, and police. Near the sea, people could watch salt appear, then be told it was not theirs. Under salt law, making your own salt could become a deliberate act of defiance. The sea left the evidence in daylight. The law insisted the subject look away. Nationalists saw what officials missed. Salt needed no translation across class or region. Gandhi needed a law whose violation could be understood in a single gesture. He chose salt because the poor felt it, and anyone could picture the crime. On March 2, 1930, Gandhi warned Lord Irwin before civil disobedience began. On March 12, Gandhi left Sabarmati with chosen followers and started walking. Village after village turned the walk into news, prayer, rumor, discipline, and crowd. At each stop, salt moved from kitchen complaint into public language. The road carried more than bodies. It carried timing, restraint, dust, and expectation. Officials watched the image grow, trapped between early arrest and public spectacle. Near Dandi, the empire waited for a handful of illegal salt. On April 6, 1930, Gandhi picked up natural salt at Dandi and broke the law. The gesture was small. Its repetition was not. Defiance spread along coasts and towns. People boiled seawater, gathered crust, sold illegal salt, and accepted arrest as evidence. The government answered with arrests, seizures, bans, and the old language of order. Before Dharasana, Gandhi was arrested. The campaign continued without his body in front. Volunteers still marched toward Dharasana Salt Works, carrying discipline instead of weapons. At Dharasana, police beat nonviolent protesters as they advanced toward the salt works. Reporters carried the scene outward. The defense of salt became an image of empire. The monopoly survived on paper, but its moral authority had been struck in public. The empire could command salt works. It could not command what people saw there. After the blows, the salt remained, white, ordinary, and guarded. A luxury tax leaves an exit. Do not buy the luxury. Salt offered no such door. The poorer the household, the larger the daily object becomes inside the budget. For a state, stable demand is seductive. The need exists before the law arrives, but the same stability exposes the tax. People know when they are trapped. The best revenue object can become the worst political image. Source, depot, route, price, patrol, court. Around salt the apparatus assembled. Every restriction created a seam, a gate, a receipt, a cart, a road. Every seam demanded repair, more records, more guards, more searches, more punishment. The object stayed light. The system around it kept gaining weight. People stopped seeing only the rule. They saw what had to be done to preserve it. Enforcement can protect a tax. It can also reveal why the tax is hated. A grain moved from table to ledger, from checkpoint to protest hand. No one needed a manifesto to understand a guard standing between people and necessity. Salt was small enough to hold and necessary enough to resent. That made it evidence. Once the object became evidence, the state could no longer control what it meant. A tax can remain legal after it has already failed in public. Salt revealed not just extraction, it revealed the point where extraction becomes visible. Return to the crystal now, and it no longer looks empty. Salt was not powerful because it was rare. It was powerful because it was unavoidable. The state did not have to control desire. It only had to control dependence. Empires did not break because salt alone defeated them. Salt exposed how they ruled. It worked best when hidden inside price, route, warehouse, permit, and habit. It failed when people could see the line between need and authority. The state can tax many things. The most dangerous tax is the one the body can taste.